Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the final session of our policy forum on untapping the potential of non-wood forest products for Europe's green economy. My name is Steven Liebrecht, and as for the other sessions, I will be your facilitator, guiding all of us through the coming few hours. Let me briefly do share screening again to proceed with introducing this particular session. Okay. Yes. So we had a two-day event, basically, with the first day, yesterday, focusing on, first of all, setting the scene, disclosing the potential of non-wood forest products. And then in the afternoon, during the second session, we have been focusing on sustainable sourcing and secure supply of non-wood forest products. Then, today, this morning, the focus was on competitive and equitable non-wood forest products value chains. But now we are approaching, or we are starting session number 4, the final session. And this is basically where we're trying to bring all the pieces of this puzzle that we have been investigating together in a session that we call a call for action. For this session, we have a new rapporteur. His name is Sven Mutke from INEA, and he will be assisted, just like for the previous sessions, by Riccardo Castellini from Cepf Foundation. Now, let us focus on what is on the menu for this particular session, called Call for Action. Well, first of all, we would like to spend a little bit of time on this document, which is the white paper on non-wood forest products for people, nature, and the green economy. Policy priorities for Europe, a white paper based on lessons learned from across the Mediterranean. That is a very long title, we realize, but it's basically the document that has served as a kind of a reference for the entire policy forum. So almost all sessions have consisted of basically components that you will find back in that white paper. And for this reason, I think it's a very good idea and suggestion to just spend a little bit of time exploring what this document is about. So that will be the first part. Then we will proceed by going to a panel discussion and debate on which we will be focusing on views from national, European and international institutions. So that is the second item on our menu. Then obviously, we still have to consider the manifesto, so the document that has been presented and for which you all had the opportunity to send in your suggestions. So we will take a look at that, but before we do that, we would like to bridge basically from the panel discussion to this manifesto, and the best way to do so, we thought, was to spend a little bit of time on bridging on future initiatives. So we take it a little bit beyond Europe and consider additional perspectives. And after considering then the manifesto, I think it should be about time to take a couple of conclusions from this policy forum and to bring it to, well, and to explain the next steps. And that will be it for today. Now, some points on how we will run this session. Some of you might have seen this slide already a couple of times. And each time there is some minor modification. So yes, again, we will have presentations. There might be some video material. There's going to be a polling exercise. There is room for Q&A. We are using Zoom webinar. So that means that regular attendees do not have the same facilities as presenters, right? With respect to the use of camera, microphone. This is just to make things feasible, knowing that we have lots of participants being part of this policy forum, and we are very grateful for that, obviously. So the organizers are the parties that can fiddle around with the settings, and if needed, somebody can be upgraded and might indeed use, a regular participant might get the use for the microphone, but it's not standard. We have a Q&A button below the screen, which enables you, the participants, to post your questions. Some of these can even be handled immediately in the same section, questions and answers. But we have a team of people that are continuously monitoring the questions and answers, and that will be selecting selecting questions and answers, or questions that will be dealt with in live, basically, during this policy forum. We also have a chat functionality as in regular Zoom, but we would like to ask you to reserve the chat for more technical comments, I would say. Don't hesitate to send in your questions even during the presentations. Don't wait for the last minute. The more time we get in looking at what's happening in the Q&A, the more time we can, the more time we have to get organized. And then a final word, and this is new and specific for this particular session. There is an additional button that you will see. It is called interpretation, right? If you would need an interpretation or translation between Italian and English, this is the place where to look for, right? So you push the interpretation button and you select the language you would like to hear. If there is no need for you to have interpretation, some persons will be talking in Italian. If you master that language, obviously you are free to listen to it directly. Now, again, a last point on respect for the debate, respect for the timings. We try to keep the event on track, which means that sometimes we have to shorten some questions or we have to cut short some of the sessions. But the only reason for that is that we know that there is a program that we try to complete, and we hope you understand. One final reminder then, this session is being recorded. You should have received a notification of that when joining the session. If you haven't seen that notification, then at least this is a reminder of that. I think we're all set to go. So I will stop my screen sharing and introduce you the person that is going to explain and elaborate a little bit on this white paper. So this document with the extremely long title. The person that I would like to introduce is a person that you have already seen earlier this morning, also yesterday. He has already introduced, I think he was one of the first presenters in this policy forum. His name is Ignacio Martinez. He's the head of EFIMED, European Forest Institute, Mediterranean Facility. Ignacio, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Steven. It's a pleasure to be with you again. I will share my screen. Hopefully it's going to work well. There it goes. Can you see it now?
Yes, it's perfect.
Okay, thank you. So here is this 20-minute presentation about this white paper, this call for action that we've been discussing through these 2 days. So reflecting on this today's morning session and how many of the issues have already been raised, and I thought it was maybe too much to go very much in detail into what we proposed there for the white paper. So I thought that it may be more useful for you to understand how we made it and what are the main lines and the main ideas behind. So what to expect from this call? This call is this talk is a call for feedback from your side and to hear what you think of this document and its content. You have all received it, and we have already discussed many of the items inside there. So we expect that you can be active and signal us if you like it, if it has some strengths, if it has some shortcomings. So we will deconstruct I will explain you the process on how we made it, and I will deconstruct a little bit its contents and core ideas, and hopefully there is time for you to give us this feedback. So first of all, this white paper is emerging from the Mediterranean region, from a network of actors in the Mediterranean, coming from different domains. We have science research centers like University of Ioannina, or the Forest Research Institute of Croatia, or the Catalan CTFC. We have actors that are more in the knowledge transfer in forestry, like the CMPF, or spin-offs also mobilizing knowledge for action in the business side, like EUSTAFOR. We have governments of Sardinia represented by the Forest Agency Forestas, and Castilla and León represented by the Cepf Foundation, and we have EFI, which we have ENGREF as a research center in Tunisia, and we have EFI as an organization network organization. We place ourselves in the interface between science and policy making. So it's a diverse network, and we have been working the last 3 years in 5 networks of innovation on cork, nuts and berries, resin, moss and truffle, aromatic, and medicinal plants. I think I lost my presentation. Okay, so of course we build in previous processes. We build very much in the StarTree project. You have it there. We have the link also in the chat that has been mentioned quite several times. We build on the cost action on non-forest products that was working before for several years also, and we have connect with other networks, of course, the IUFRO Task Force on Bioeconomy and Non-Forest Products, and FAO, large efforts in also non-forest products at the global scale. So the starting point of this innovation networks was a collective mapping of the different value chains, looking at who produces the supply, who is the picker, who is the harvester, who is the manager of the land, how this is sell, formal, informal markets, gray markets, how this is transferred through middlemen or not to processors, and what is happening inside this first, second transformation, and how it reaches the market. So through this mapping, we identify barriers, blocks, opportunities, challenges, gathering the views of different actors in the value chain, associations of pickers, individual pickers, harvester workers, trade unions, companies, retailers, etc. And we did this separately for the different value chains. Okay, but then we had several activities. Starting from this point, we made an iterative process of addressing those challenges we had identified, looking at different interregional workshops and science to practice events, engaging stakeholders and different actors, trying to find solutions, best examples, cases, available knowledge to try to fix some of the key core issues that we identify, of course, with the feedback loops. And then we had some activities across these different INETs that we call them, innovation networks, in a community of practice, so we could share experiences, lessons learned, transfer information. So we had this iterative process of innovation and knowledge sharing within each of the networks, and then we have this community of practice across them, also with cross-cutting activities like seminars focusing on specific issues that are of general interest, open innovation challenges that we conducted to ask the broader community to help us finding solutions, and we are a common repository of knowledge where some of the cases or examples are relevant for everybody else. So, and of course, through this process, we've been condensing policy lessons and recommendations that emerge, and this is what we have compiled. So just to give you a flavor of the project intensities, we had activities specifically on territorial marketing, territorial approaches, linkages between non-good forest products and the territory, in tourism, also in payment for ecosystem services opportunities, specific seminars and activity across all these INETs in business and entrepreneurship. What are the opportunities, challenges, needs for action, and of course, and also in digitalization, new communication and digital technologies, how they can be applied to some of these issues. So that was the process. We start with the value chain mapping of the actors, mapping of the challenges, opportunities as seen by the different actors. These challenges have been worked out in an iterative process, and we have produced, of course, with the feedbacks across the INETs, and then we have produced, as some of the core output, this knowledge repository with ready-to-use knowledge in the language of the European Commission, and best cases, practices, and of course, again, these policy conclusions for use. So let me tell you just one reflection on this process. When we look at the problems that the different stakeholders are facing, if we look, many of them, or most of them, are in the supply side. And this is interesting, discussing also with industrial partners, some of them very powerful industries, very, very strong global leaders in resin or in cork or mid-sized pilot processors or mushroom dealers. It's something which is maybe self-evident, but it's worth deep reflection. Is most of the issues are not related to technology or process or product development. They are most of them have to do with the supply side, how to arrange, how to source the biomass, how to source the products, the ingredients, and then we have many other issues at the end of the value chain in the access to market. I come back to this, but in the middle, what we have is a general, let's say, more general request or necessity to have an industrial ecosystem that works, linkage with science, political support or subsidies or support lines for industry, but in a very general, not very different from any other sector. So what we really have specifically here is the supply side, because we are working with nature and with multiple actors, and then in the market side. And not so many things in the middle. So the supply side challenges are related to the uncertainties that climate change brings. We have discussed a lot of sustainable harvesting with all these dimensions in terms of knowledge, practices, control, monitoring. Sometimes the lack of resource. Cork industry, they are confident that they could really make a much larger impact. They have fantastic portfolio of products in fashion, in construction, flooring, of course, in stoppers of very different qualities, but they are really constrained by the lack of resource. And the contradiction is here that many cork producing stands are being abandoned in France, in Italy, in many other places, in Catalonia. So this is a key issue, the availability of resource. Then this lack of profitability at the bottom of the value chain. Here, this graphic is representing the added value in the sustainable cosmetic business. For the first steps in the value chain, there is very little. All the value is captured downstream. And this means that these value chains are very difficult. They have a lot of difficulties to generate enough profit. And this means to pay improved salaries and to mobilize also the workforce in where you have sometimes difficult working conditions or not very well, let's say, socially accepted or socially validated conditions. Lack of skilled labor, sometimes access rights, unfit regulation, for example, for the cork DSAs, where the current regulation we hear representative from European Commission yesterday, acknowledging that the agroforestry system are not well recognized, not well supported, and even there is a perverse incentive to take the trees out to increase the direct payments in the CAP. And of course, everything that is related to these micro enterprises or whatever. But you see there are many issues. And a reflection here is that most of the science that we have and the knowledge is not targeting these issues. Most of them are social issues. It's about social innovation. It's about arrangement. It's about trust. It's about business modeling or business models, but and this ecological social setup. Okay, then there is key challenge in the access to market. And let's say this is the confusion in the market. We don't know. We can have ecological pine nuts, but are they from where? We have truffa flavors everywhere. What type of truffa is that one? Is artificial, natural, difficult to know. And if we go to elaborated products, it's even more difficult. So this confusion in the market, the impossibility to make the best on the positive externalities of a wild or a natural product that is lost in most of the cases. And this means increased concurrence with bio and non-bio cultivated, or concurrence with imported products as substitutes. And with this, we understand is bad for the local producers because they have components from the imported, but also it's bad for the countries of origin because also most of the utilities or most of the benefits is extracted by the trader and not by the producer there. So we have all these issues to the market, and these are the, let's say, very summarizing common elements cross-cutting. This will be this, and you will see in the white paper that we are not putting a lot of emphasis, let's say, in innovation, in products, in transformation, that we are focusing a lot in the supply and in the market side. And this is why this flow of information, this labeling, these traceability issues are so prominent. And it was very interesting to see in the morning, in the polling we made in the vote, that this specifically data flows is the most important one for the attendance to this webinar, because it relates very, very strong as the connection between the supply side and the market side. And this connection, of course, is also broken in the second transformation process, but it's mainly because we don't have the market pool and we don't have the origin traceability set up. So then in the middle is much more difficult to work it out. So this will be very generally the challenges that we identify, the challenges that we are addressing in the white paper, why it has the content that it has. And we believe that despite this strong Mediterranean flavor, as we write, is relevant also beyond the Mediterranean and beyond these specifically 5, let's say, subsectors or 5 subtypes of non-wood forest products. But of course, it's not only barriers, it's not only difficulties. We also worked a lot on opportunities, and there are many strong mega trends emerging. These lifestyles of health and sustainability, also in some cases, the halal tourism, many elements there related to these healthy lifestyles that these wild nature-based, forest-based products can address is the bioeconomy, the decarbonization, replacement of fossil fuels, etc. This strong policy and market trend that is emerging. And of course, specifically, this experiential tourism, this natural rural tourism, a strong push that I think after the COVID-19, I don't know if I'm sure I don't have the data for all of Europe or the world, but it's, in many regions it's actually happening, that the rural tourism is really having a boom in demand. And of course, many intrinsic values, many intrinsic properties of the product, some of them linked to their specific flavors or qualities, but sometimes also linked to the values associated in terms of naturalness, wilderness, nature conservation, etc. So there is many opportunities to build upon, and we also try to capture them. So as saying you, we see a lot of graphs and things, but this project is about people. We had over 70 events discussing all these ideas, looking for examples, discussing with the stakeholders what they feel, and we have tried to systematically also gathering also in this community of practice, gather all these recommendation solutions. We draft with all this heavy technical document, and then we summarize it and condense in the white paper. So coming to the white paper, it's like one of our flagships in terms of making an impact outside, in the outside world also. So what is the objective of the white paper? It's a call to recognize the values and to leverage them, forest products. I think we are answering James' proposal that we need governments to take responsibility. And here we call governments, but not only governments. To recognize this as a natural resource, as a cultural heritage that has big potentials to contribute to the SDGs, to policy priorities, and to do something with this recognition, to really take action. So we identify for this the key policy areas that we think must be adapted, tackled, that require attention, and then for these areas we suggest action, as said, not only by the decision makers, which is important of course, but also by other stakeholders, and some actions are at the global level, some actions are at regional, national, or local levels. So this is a little bit in a nutshell what we pretend with the white book. So this is the content. We have an initial chapter where we say, hey, this is what we are doing for the SDGs. This is what non-forest products can do for EU, in this case, EU core policies like the Green Deal, the Forest Strategy, the food and farm to fork strategy, the pharma strategy, the green chemistry strategy or policy. So here we have been victims of this lack of data. And sometimes, many times, politicians ask you facts and figures, employment, trade, volume, and there is little. There is not easy to find, and there are many reports of different quality. So, but then we made our best to make the point for non-forest products, and then we summarize what are the major gaps that explain why this large potential is not being totally developed or realized. So, very in a summary, we have these 4 elements. The first one is that we have too many known unknowns that thwart the strategic decision making. There are many gaps in our knowledge and understanding, so it's difficult to really plan, address in a systematic way what to do and how to move forward these potentials. Second is this very fragmented policy landscape and the lack of coherent action. We're very happy to hear also the DG head of unit yesterday that he discussed this limbo where the non-forest products are, and it is one of the core ideas, I think, of this white paper. Non-forest products are in sometimes in a no man land or no woman land. They are in the boundary between agriculture and forestry, between wild and managed. And this makes that many of the policies, like for example, the food regulation not fully applies, traceability requirements for food sometimes amazingly are not applied to mushroom. We hear some problems with intoxication of mushroom. This is a problem also of traceability and correct labeling. So I think we need to also for policy support in the CAP in many other cases. So we really think we need to bring these products out of this limbo or out of these boundary areas and clarify where they are. And then of course we discuss the supply gap. Let's say in some cases the supply gap. We had some questions in the morning also signaling at the risk of overexploitation, if we can supply everything. So we're looking at this. Do we have enough resin? Do we have enough cork? Do we have enough mushroom? Do we have enough tannins to supply a bioeconomy or the growing demand? And what can we do to fulfill this gap? And so we consider different options, but of course also domestication and other issues. And then of course we need the need to secure sustainable harvesting and fair trade, both inside Europe and also in the countries of origin of imported products. Europe is a major importer of non-wood forest products, and Europe has a responsibility, both the governments at the EU level, individual governments, but also operators, to secure the sustainability, the harvest levels, the harvest techniques, but also the fairness and equitability of trade. And not only of trade, internal production and trade. So this will be in a nutshell what are the major gaps that we are addressing here. And for this, and I'm going to go very brief on these slides, don't get afraid, this is a summary of the actions we recommend. So we structured the policy recommendations in these four areas. First one is securing the conservation and sustainable supply. So here we discuss about enhancing the resource base, how to activate, we need to activate management in many cases. We need sometimes to look at domestication. We need to recognize agroforestry systems. We need, of course, to develop instruments for long-term investment and bridge this gap on return to investment. And we need to look for a forestry which is more integrative, and we move from timber-first approaches to more multifunctional, service-first and multifunctionality-first approaches in forestry. Second, we look at how to ensure the harvest levels. So we need to build capacities. We need advisory services that have the content and the capacities to assessorate and to promote innovation in these sectors. We need trained workers. We need monitoring and control, but also we need clear harvest rights that be respected and regulated properly. And then we recommend, we have issues related to improve monitoring system. We have discussed extensively in the past day and a half on how we need and how we can do this at different levels. Jane was telling us at the co-region level, at the national level, at the local level, etc. And how this can be embedded in the national inventories. We have the case of Serbia that they are advancing clearly in this area. So many of these things are illustrated with examples and activities. Then we have a second big area that we have been discussing, building competitive and equitable value chains. So we need territorial place-based value chains. Sometimes we need to open public forests to co-management. We think we need to contractualize relationship with pickers and processors. In some cases, this is like the riders of Glovo or Deliveroo or Uber Foods. These riders are workers for a company, but they're in a legal limbo as autonomous. I think we need to contractualize to clarify these relationships. Of course, there are issues related to business models, to the synergies with tourism, which are so strategic, as David was telling us. We need to differentiate in the markets and support this differentiation, the quality, origin, and sustainability. Also, David was building on that and has input, of course, to this white paper in this respect. Promote certification. We had also from Traffic and Anastasia some highlights in this respect, and maybe support payment for ecosystem services, because we need to make these externalities, to internalize them and to make all this, to bridge this great market failure also at the bottom of the value chain. So we are also demanding new fiscal and labor regime. We have a long section in that. We are discussing the Italian developments and how we can clarify this fiscal regime, not only because tax is important as a revenue, is because it's the entry point for traceability. We need to know who is the picker, so we need the right taxation system so the picker will become legal and will not become gray or black in the market. So taxation it goes beyond collecting taxes, is because we need to establish trust and fairness at the base of the value chain and be able to identify from there in the process. Labor policies for seasonality. And then, of course, we need to strengthen pickers associations, producer associations, increase transparency, price setting, trust in the value chain, etc. Maybe probably help integrate downstream in some cases, so the profit that is made downstream reverts into upstream. We have a lot on traceability and innovation flow. We have discussed a lot on this, how we need this list of priority species, how we need additional surveys, additional data, collective effort. We highlight the responsibility of operators in providing data in their sectors, and we make a call to them, to companies and operators to open their records in volumes, in trade, in imports, but hopefully also in prices, to give a more fair environment and fair markets. So we discussed traceability, labeling with some examples there. I think we have insisted in this. We highlight some ICT solutions, some new technology that can be applied for this. And that's it. This facility access to that I was mentioning already. And finally, we discussed this enabling conditions, and maybe here we are asking governments at different levels to create coherent non-wood forest product plans for the core, more relevant ones, so we can have a more coherent political action. And some of the actions are of higher level. We need to advance between common, more shared views about conservation versus management, and how we can make the best of our natural resources for human well-being, for biodiversity, and for the economy. And we discuss a lot about this hierarchy of uses, cascade, circular approaches, efficiency of use, because we know we have scarce natural resources in very general terms. Anyway, it's a claim to develop a coherent framework, starting maybe from these national or regional plans, and also clarifying where non-forest products are in this limbo or in this boundary between policies. We discuss again the need for increased financial support for some specific issues and to solve some specific barriers, and general call also to foster innovation. I was telling you before, when it comes to science, I think there is a brilliant and bright community on research, but it's a lot focused on biophysical issues. And I think we need to increase the social and ecological dimensions of non-wood forest products, the social science side of research, but also we need to be much more able to transfer this knowledge. I think there is a critical role of the advisory services and rural innovation agencies. I think we need a lot more of innovation and a bit less maybe of control. If we look at our forest services, they came along, or they were created when forestry or forest cover was at the minimum, at the historical minimum. And they have a strong still mentality of protecting the resource, which is necessary. But maybe on top of this, we need more capacities and more human resources, and more focus on generating innovation with forest products in general terms. So this will be the core messages: more social science, and more transfer of this knowledge, and more specifically support to rural innovation, and to embed the non-wood forest products in rural development agencies' agendas. So this is in a nutshell the white paper. I don't know if I went too fast or it was a bit too much, this overview. I hope it was useful for you to make a fresh reading to it, and to understand a little bit where this comes from. Thank you, Stephen.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ignacio, for, again, a very rich presentation. I can imagine that some people perhaps haven't received or seen this document. Could you perhaps make a statement on whether these people could receive the document, or when will it be ready, if you feel it is not yet ready, because it's a white paper, and I think many people will be interested in this. Could you give a comment on that? Yes,
we send this white paper to all participants before this, so all registered participants should have received it, unless maybe they register very in the last minute. They can ask in the chat or send us an email. We can send a copy, and our idea is, after this policy forum, to make a final review of the content. We still have not developed the summary, the conclusions, but maybe there are some specific measures that we will still improve. So there is some time.
Excellent. Yes. So in the chat, participants might find the web link to the document, I understand. Sarah, perhaps you would like to make a comment?
That was all I was going to say, but I've just posted the link in the chat.
Excellent. So yes, most attendees should have already received the white paper, but there might be still slight changes coming up. And anyhow, you can have, if you haven't received it, the web link is the place where to find it. Okay. I'm looking at whether we have questions coming in. Please, people, send your questions if you have. As there are no ones at this moment, I suggest, Gerard, could we could we have one of these videos? We have this collection of short videos.
Steven, maybe Gerhard has placed a question. Maybe he wants to do it live.
My apologies. Yes, for me that is okay. I'm just juggling too many screens. My apologies.
So Gerhard is there. He was very active in a StarTree project and dealing with innovation. So I think he can have a very good input here.
I imagine, Sarah, could you give?
I promoted him. He should be able to join now.
So when you feel you have the option, Gerard, please make your statement. Gerard, I think you should have received the rights now to activate your microphone and your camera. Okay, if not, if Gerhard maybe is not. Okay.
I will leave him there, and then he could join later.
No problem. In the meantime, let's proceed with this video. So, shall we look at one of these shorter videos we have that show the richness of non-wood forest products? And yes, the video is about to start.
Insula Natural Body Care is an herbalist cosmetic laboratory born in 2018 in Sardinia. At Insula, we aim at creating high-quality products that use only natural ingredients and are always completely biodegradable. All our formulas are developed according to the criteria of the Mediterranean herbal tradition, using the typical Sardinian essences. Many of our ingredients derive from organic farming or are collected from the spontaneous flora. This is the case of the Helichrysum italicum microphyllum that grows endemic only in Sardinian cores. From the Helichrysum, we produce the essential oils that enrich our soaps and skincare products. This is the most remarkable outcome of our true herbalist passion.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I believe all of you will agree with me that it's a nice collection of short videos. We still have many more that we would like to just drop in every now and then. And I think we intend to make these available also through the website. And for sure, these are going to be elements that we also will use for the final conference of our project. Now, before proceeding, let's have a last check on whether Gerhard in the meantime has found a facility to, or the way to activate the microphone so that he could give a comment on the white paper.
Stephen, I'm not seeing a microphone icon activated for him, so I can't help with that.
No problem. Then we just proceed with the program, and then let's take the next stop on our journey we are having all together. And as the next point, we are going to have a panel debate. And for this panel debate, or during this panel debate, we will basically be looking at non-wood forest products through different lenses. I think lenses was the word also used by Jim Chamberlain yesterday. And for us, each set of these lenses obviously offers a unique perspective. And during this panel debate, we will try to explore and understand that perspective. And these perspectives are represented by participants coming, so panelists basically coming from different institutions at different levels, national level, European level, the international level. All panel members will have an opportunity to bring in a unique perspective with probably some own messages, right? Now, the perspectives we will deal with are the national level, looking at the case of a EU member state. Then we will take a look at still the national level, but at a country outside the European Union. Then we will proceed with the European level, where we'll take a closer look at two associations. And finally, we'll take a look at, yes, European level. Obviously, we should also be discussing about the European Commission, right? Well, the structure of this panel basically will consist of two major blocks. The first block will deal about, yes, what is the place of these non-wood forest products in the political agenda, if you like, of the respective panelists. So we try to understand the perspective, perhaps challenges they face at their level. And in the second half of our panel debate, we will basically make take the step to, well, what needs to happen? This is, at the end of the day, this is a session on a call for action. So we need to discuss what needs to happen from their perspective, right? So that is the structure. But let's simply start the debate. And well, if we first take a closer look at this national level, it's very clear that we can say that there are several countries known for the non-wood forest products. So I think in the previous sessions, we had some great examples with some great testimonies, some excellent video material that has been presented, etc. But it's clear one of these countries, without any doubt, is going to be Italy. So we all know the great Italian food with truffles, chestnuts, pine nuts. Italy has a tradition of using and extracting value from non-wood forest products. We are therefore pleased that we can introduce in our panel Mrs. Stefani, who is the General Director of the Forestry Division of the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry in Italy. Mrs. Stefani, thank you. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and welcome to this panel. Before I raise my question, I would like to highlight to all attendees, she will respond, Mrs. Stefani will respond in Italian, but you, in case you need interpretation, you can activate this button that you will find at the below, basically at the bottom of your screen with Zoom control, right? So, Mrs. Stefani, welcome, and could you share with us how important non-wood forest products are in the Italian context, and where non-wood forest products are positioned in the policy-making landscape in Italy, please.
Molte grazie, buon pomeriggio a tutti e molti complimenti per l'organizzazione di questo forum e di tutto il lavoro che l'ha preceduto.
Congrats for the important organization of this forum. It's true, in Italy we have a great tradition in harvesting, cultivation, processing of NWFPS, and the Italian landscape has been modified over the centuries by the cultivation of specific species. We have a great landscape created by man, by the humans, in order to cultivate traditional plants. This great tradition had a crisis during the 60s or 70s when people deserted, left mountains and hills, and we faced the risk for our typical products to disappear in favor of industrial products. Then we faced the risk to lose territories like pine forests, for example. So some crops disappeared, some species disappeared. The chestnut forest had illnesses, so we risked losing the genotype that had been selected over the centuries. There was a strong political initiative to update the regulations as a request, as a demand for what products that were considered healthier, with a better taste, included in a food chain, which is very important for Italy, as you might know. So we had new demands, and the old regulations, which aimed at not allowing an overexploitation of the resources, So these regulations needed to be updated. The turning point was in 2018, when we had a series of new interventions at the national level to coordinate regional policies, because our organization includes a specific regional competence, but we needed a national coordination. So the new Forestry Law of 2018 dedicated 2 articles among the 19 articles of the law. So 2 articles of the law were specific for NWFPs. In the new law, it is written that regions had duty, the task to give value to these products, to define new management modalities, to foster the production capacity of the forest, which means to give value chains which have a better performance, because in Italy we still have some problems. We need these products need to respect traditional values, but have to be in line with modern indications and with a distinction between self-consumption and harvesting. It was published in our official national documents in April, and in May we had a new regulation about medicinal plants, which sees the safeguard of biodiversity apparently to use these products. And in December of the same year, we had a new regulation about unification of fiscal systems, which maybe I will discuss about this later. But we had the unification of the fiscal systems for all these products by making a distinction between professional harvesters, professional foragers, and self-consumption. In this way, as we heard this morning from Mr. Vidale, he talked about a collapse of businesses because of tax systems which were not aligned with the needs of the businesses. So this started to grow again, and last year we had more than 1,000 subscriptions only in the field of truffles. So we saw a difference between careful policies made of cooperation with the stakeholders and a kind of policies that were negative for the sector.
I definitely would like to continue to explore on these achievements, and we will do so in the next round perhaps. But before doing so, I think it's interesting to also introduce the other panel members. And after the example of Italy, let us stay for a while on this national level, but consider the case of a country that is not a member of the European Union. More specifically, let's take a closer look at Ukraine. We are therefore pleased that we can welcome in our panel Mrs. Polyakova, who is the head of International Cooperation, Science and Public Relations Division of the State Forest Resources Agency of Ukraine. Furthermore, she is also the acting chair of FAO's European Forestry Commission. Mrs. Polyakova, thank you for accepting our invitation and welcome to this panel. Could you share with us the reality on non-wood forest products in Ukraine? What is the current role and place of these products in Ukraine? How important are they for Ukraine? Please.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank organizers for inviting me. It is an honor for me to participate in this important event. Unfortunately, I'd like to say that non-wood forest products is not very high on political agenda in forest policy of Ukraine, but it is quite important for season for collecting mushrooms and berries. Is quite important for local population, especially in north and western part of Ukraine, and for their well-being. I'd like to underline that we have a free access to forest, and people are able to collect whatever they want for their own needs free of charge. If it is industrial use of non-forest products, non-wood forest products, they must obtain forest ticket, which is provided by local authorities, keeping in mind sustainability of forest resources. I'd like to share also my experience and importance of non-wood forest products for forest enterprises. In principle, unfortunately, it's not in a very high use, especially right now. It's low awareness of importance as additional source for covering expenses for SFM. Especially right now, when we have economical crisis as well as consequences of climate change, resulted in increased amount of forest fires, outbreaks of pests and diseases, and of course decreased quality of timber aside from forest. Use of non-wood forest products as additional source of financing is quite important. If we are speaking about variety of non-wood forest products, first of all, it's game and New Year's trees. It's a common product for the whole Ukraine. However, we have some regions which are traditionally using different kind of different types of non-wood forest products, especially Berlin region. They have facility for processing birch sap. They're processing different types of mushrooms, as well as producing different types of gems from berries. Over to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for clarifying the landscape, if you like, of non-wood forest products in Ukraine. For sure, we will continue the debate later on more specific questions like challenges, etc. But let's, before we do that, let's continue to bring in additional members to this panel debate. And let us now take the step from the national level to the European level, first looking at a couple of associations. And the first perspective we would like to explore at the European level is that of state forests. And to that extent, we have as a guest, Mr. Piotr Borkowski. He is the Executive Director of EUSTAFOR. Mr. Borkowski, thank you for your presence at this panel. And why don't you perhaps briefly explain what EUSTAFOR is? And could you then tell how you look at non-wood forest products from a state forestry perspective?
Thank you very much for your kind invitation to the event, which is indeed my pleasure to participate in, and then also for this nice welcome. Yes, indeed, for us who are representing the large-scale state forest managers, the non-wood forest products is, of course, a part of the whole system, which we call as management, forestry system, forest management system. And then just to explain maybe a little bit about the organization as the association, we do represent 36 state forest organizations of different organization form coming from a number of EU member states, but also from non-EU countries. What is in common that our members are responsible for the management of the public forestry assets. And this is particularly related to certain specific missions state forestry has in every country towards the society, because then as a part of the offer from the government, from the state to the society is exactly, as Luba mentioned, the free access to forests. Also, when we discuss about non-commercial use of this multitude of benefits that forests deliver, we also have to say that, especially when it comes to non-wood forest products, this is at the service of the society, of the members of the society. Of course, EUSTAFOR and its members are promoting sustainable forest management concept, multifunctional forestry, which is also related to the obligation of our members to directly implement the legal provisions of forest legislation in each European country. And then the sustainability and multifunctional concepts are embedded in the national legislation. But then, of course, referring to the non-wood forest products, in our case, is rather, as I said, making it available for the society. In some cases, like also Luba described, because I think there are quite a lot of similarities, and then even if Ukraine is not a member, the forest organization from Ukraine is not a member of EUSTAFOR, but then the tradition of managing state forests in Central and East Europe is rather similar. That's why also, of course, in addition to benefiting from timber sale, which is the main source of income, we in state forests very often do sell the other forest products like stone, like gravel, like peat. So this comes in addition to the main source of income, but thanks to this, the entire system of this multifunctional and sustainable management is workable, and it's economically on the solid basis to allow us also to serve not only non-wood forest products, but also the multitude of forest ecosystems to the society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Borkowski. And well, obviously, there are also for this many more aspects to consider, and we will do so in the follow-up rounds. But let's continue to bring in additional members to our panel. And the next perspective we would like to introduce, basically, is that of European but private forest owners, so not public forestry. And after the case of these public forests, let's consider private forest owners, and they are responsible of managing more than 60% of the European forests and other wooded lands. So it's a significant portion. And we are therefore pleased to welcome in this panel, Mr. Soares, who has delivered yesterday, I think, one of these wonderful Pecha Kucha speeches. But he is a Portuguese farmer and forest owner himself. He is the president of the Portuguese Landowners Association, a member of the board of CAP, Confederation of Portuguese Farmers, and a member of the board of Confederation of European Forest Owners, CEPF. I have to look at my paper to be able to state all that. I hope you understand. So, Mr. Soares, thank you for accepting our invitation. Welcome to this panel. Could you share with us the perspective of CEPF on non-wood forest products, please?
Well, good afternoon, Stephen, and thank you so much for the invitation to be part of this special debate with such important entities being here talking about non-wood forest products. It's a pleasure for me and for CPF. And just to make a small presentation, the Confederation of European Forest Owners, CPF, represents national forest owners organizations in Europe at an EU level, and it promotes the values of sustainable forest management, private property ownership, and forest sector economic viability. So, being non-wood forest products an important part of the social and economical reality of European forests, CPF is well aware about the value of these products and that they have differences from one country to another. So at an EU level, and as it has been discussed these 2 days of webinar, the average value of non-wood products, it's rather unknown. And as we've been discussing, it's probably much higher than the existing estimated values. And we know that to give strength and political value to non-wood forest products, we need to change the system in some of those products. So we know that forests are a complex system, and the support of sustainable forest management must rely on its economical revenue to provide an effective management. We have been discussed that, and I've mentioned it also in my presentation yesterday. So, but we know that in many countries in Europe, non-wood forest products make a big part of that revenue. So we need to look with a positive perspective to the importance of non-wood forest products. And with this, I can give my personal view and experience on the relevance of these products and value chains, particularly in the south of Portugal, where I live and work, and where cork, pines nuts, mushrooms, tourism and hunting are some among the sources of revenue for private forest owners, and they sustain highly valuable enterprises and value chains. So in my case, and in the case of many private forest owners, they are in fact the biggest income for our forests. So then we also need to consider non-wood forest products as a part of the ecosystem service provided by forests. Now that we are discussing the ecosystem services under the biodiversity strategy or the EU forest strategy, the non-wood forest products are among the various ecosystem services provided by forests. And when we are discussing the list of potential ecosystem services in these strategies, we need for sure to reinforce the role of non-wood forest products. I think this is pretty much the view that CPF and especially the private owners that we can give at this point from non-wood forest products.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Mr. Soares. So what is interesting is that now we have already 4 panel members, and the perspectives that are coming in are quite clearly different, I would say. So where Mrs. Stefani was pointing towards a number of achievements that have been become a reality in Italy, even at the legislative, from a legislation perspective. Mrs. Polyakova then illustrated the situation in Ukraine. But then when we look at forests from a state forestry perspective, it's very clear that this societal role is coming in quite clearly as explicitated by Mr. Borkowski. While on the other hand, if you look at privately owned forests, it's the economic dimension that counts, that we should not forget. And it is a reality as well. So that's already consisting of a very interesting melting pot. Now, before we proceed with this panel debate, let's bring in the final speaker of the final member of this group of people. Well, if we talk about the political agenda at the European level, obviously, we have to look at the European Commission, without any doubt, and explore the perspective of the European Commission. We are therefore extremely pleased to have with us, as our final guest in this panel, Mr. Umberto Delgado Rosa, who is the Director of Natural Capital within the Directorate General DG Environment of the European Commission. Mr. Delgado Rosa, welcome to this panel. We understand that you are Portuguese, so for sure, non-wood forest products such as cork, but also many others, must be very close to your heart. But in your capacity as the Director of Natural Capital, could you explain us what your perspective is on non-wood forest products and their current place in the political agenda of the European Commission?
Good afternoon, Stephen. Thank you for inviting me and having me. I hope you listen to me well. I will say a word on cork, but let me indeed put it first in a wider perspective. And from the lenses we have in the European Commission, and particularly in DG Environment, now the lenses are that we are facing in the world, and including in Europe, quite an ecological crisis, in the sense that human development has attained many good things, but at the expense of the biosphere, the atmosphere, the ocean, land, and we totally depend on the biosphere. So that's why we have this European Green Deal as the political response to this situation, which is increasingly recognized by European society. So when we look to forests, we see that society is now expecting more from forests for climate, for nature and biodiversity, and for the bioeconomy, of course. So in this sense, going to products that go beyond wood is something we have in mind for long, not because wood is not important, it's fundamental, but it's also, let's say, or the usual, regular approach on generating revenues from forest products, while there are many others which are often a win-win because they do not imply a priori the same level of potential environmental impact as tree felling may imply. You don't have the equivalent to a clear cut when we are addressing non-wood forest products. So we see them with a lot of interest. I would even say, to say some words on ecosystem services, of course, we all want to identify, recognize, and value ecosystem services of several kinds, some of which are not easily monetizable. Let's say what a forest can deliver on soil protection, on a carbon sink, clean air, clean water is not necessarily something that a forest owner can be easily rewarded for. So it's easier, of course, when we can use these harvestable products by one side, which very clearly can generate a revenue. But also that also interests us, which is, let's say, the non-material wood, non-wood products that were also referred, those related to ecotourism, from bird watching to arborism, or whatever non-extractive activity that forests also rely. So for us, we cherish very much this multifunctionality approach of forests indeed, including timber and beyond timber. I've heard the challenges ahead, several of them. I can tell you this debate and this white paper is rather opportune because we will be coming with the EU forest strategy this year. By mid of the year, we expect to have it out. Actually, there's a public consultation ongoing now, if I'm not mistaken, until the 16th of April. So do bring your inputs. And it's very good for us to have this perception of the challenges that you have identified, several of which I've heard, and which actually can help us in elaborating the forest strategy. I said I would say a word on cork. Yes, indeed, you know, Portuguese do know cork, and that's something they know is that cork comes from a rather sustainable ecosystem. You don't cut the tree to take out cork, and you can only take the cork every 9 to 10 years. So it's something really sustainable. We were shocked some time ago to see some campaigns on alternative caps for bottles that would label cork as unsustainable, while indeed it maintains a fantastic agroforestry system with a lot of wild nature, including the Iberian lynx is now returning with some help from forest owners, including in these montados or dehesas as in Spain. So for me to see these non-wood products coming in, which are often not fully understandable or recognized everywhere in Europe, is very important for our political setting. Some of the challenges, I think, are related to the farm to fork strategy in terms of the value chains, labeling, price setting, traceability, standards, food regulations. All this links nicely with the deliverables of the farm to fork strategy. And the others, I expect the forest strategy, as I say, to probably be giving a hand. Maybe I stop here. There's a chance to discuss further. Thank you.
Excellent. No, thank you so much, Mr. Delgado Rosa. Well, indeed, let us continue around. And perhaps I would like to return to Mrs. Stephanie, if that's okay. And what I would like to ask her is the following question. I think it's abundantly clear that Italy has this number of successful stories or success cases in non-wood forest products, and you depicted a couple of them yourself with this rather new legislation, etc. So that's wonderful. So there are good examples of public-private partnerships, also in tourism, this taxation of it, etc. Now, perhaps a question for you. It's not always easy to
sì, grazie.
Yeah. So for you, what have been the success factors to achieve these successes? Could you explore a bit on how Italy has basically achieved these and mastered these challenges? Tell us.
Allora, credo che uno dei più grandi fattori di successo che hanno consentito di varare delle norme e una pianificazione
some laws and regulations that favored, but we're still at the beginning, and there is still so much that can be done, and so much will be done over the next few years. One of the biggest factors was the great turning point of the tables, tavoli di filiera, at our ministry with the representation of the regions. The tables of the value chain divided for each topic. So forestal chain, so fruit chain, so medical plants chain, divided into these different tables. So there was a collective participation of all stakeholders that are sat to discuss and bring in their own perspective to obtain a final synthesis that includes everyone's interest in the best possible way. This is how the rule of medical plans was born, which I mentioned previously. This is how the plan for the chain of truffle was born, that anticipated the new regulation on truffle that is still being discussed at the Parliament. This is how the initiatives were born in order to set the guidelines for the management of these product chains entrusted to the regions subsequently. I believe that this is a correct interpretation of how co-manage the legislative and planning process, respecting each single responsibility. The ministry can't be exempted from being the drafter of legislation, laws, and regulations. The private landowner is not exempted from showing his needs, the processor also, and all of them, if they sit together, they can find a solution together. The new forestal law was anticipated by a 4-year work by the Forestal Roundtable in order to set a law text, a law draft. Then some events, parliamentary events, didn't make it possible to translate it directly. But I think that that was the most positive experience. We are still working in the ministry with this concerted mode, also using all of the drafts that come out these tables. We have also subgroups that prepare the drafts, and then we listen the opinions of our stakeholders and we discuss these opinions all together. Now, of course, there are some difficulties due to COVID and self-distancing and difficulty to discuss remotely, but we managed also with 90 participants, as you are doing today, with a similar system, and we are trying to continue along this virtuous approach that, in our opinion, is, I think, is the reason why we changed the system of working and also the system of listening to the needs. We have also other systems. The mechanisms were also published on the website by the Forestal Ministry, but the initiative of the different thematic tables is a virtuous mechanism, is a virtuous system.
So you clearly point towards basically engaging stakeholders as a key ingredient, a critical success factor. But I can imagine at the same time that might be quite some challenge, because it presupposes that there is enough trust for these people to be part of this exercise and to work in a partnership modus. So how did you create this climate of trust? Because it's wonderful that you managed to do so. So how did you succeed in this?
Diciamo che
well, let's say that the initial impact was not easy. The differences in a few instances, of course, there are still some differences. When you can find a balance point, you interrupt the works, you rethink about it, you update after a few weeks. Meanwhile, you elaborate some proposals altogether, some mitigation works on some specific points, and with patience, with politeness. And we are lucky because I work with a team that under this perspective, Mr. Jenica is listening, the manager in charge of this, Mr. Manzo, in charge of also the run table on the productive side, not the forestal side, and other department. All of them are extremely polite persons, able to continue discussions with their purposes in mind, but respecting everyone's opinions. But time is also necessary. Time is necessary to ripen awareness and understand the difference between bringing a problem in, finding a solution, writing the decree that is necessary to get there. It's not that easy. It's not an easy task, but the more you try this approach, the easier it is to get into the real debate.
So it's about taking small steps, gradually build up step by step, together with all partners involved. This level of trust that allows you then to basically take this decision. It's a marvelous example. It shows basically what can be achieved at the national level. Now, that's quite a challenge, but I would like to turn now to Mrs. Polyakova again. During this policy forum, also today, even yesterday, we had this clear messages of the importance of the availability of data. I think Jim Chamberlain was really advocating, we need data, we need to base our decisions on data, and this data need to be reliable. So that is not always obvious. That is not always easy to have this data. So it is a key challenge and a prerequisite for evidence-based decision-making. So what are your experiences in Ukraine on this huge challenge of data availability? Could you share?
Thank you, Stephen. It is really a challenge also for Ukraine. We have more or less reliable data on the state forest, and almost nothing about communal forest, as well as nothing about consumption and request for non-wood forest products from local population. And I'd like to say that it is a common challenge for European countries as well. Last year it was published a report prepared within Forest Europe process. And nevertheless, it is one of the criteria of SFM. Only 32 countries from 46 were able to report on non-wood forest products and marketable place of this product. Over to you.
Thank you. So, well, that's nice to have this information on Ukraine. Now, what I would like to do now, perhaps, is switch to Mr. Borkowski. And you mentioned, Mr. Borkowski, you mentioned this societal role, so to speak, of forests, especially state forests. Now, we all know society is facing severe challenges. Mr. Delgado Rosa already indicated several of them. So there is climate change, impacts, loss of biodiversity, the sustainability objectives we have, and that have been discussed also in the other sessions of this policy forum. It's quite clear that forests have a role to play in addressing these societal challenges. But it also means that society probably starts to look at forests, or should start to look at forests, with new eyes. So perhaps expectations are changing on forests. So what does it mean, these changing expectations? So what does it mean specifically for state forests then, and for non-wood forest products, obviously? Could you elaborate on that?
Indeed, yes, you asked the right question, and then with the development of so-called participatory society, but on the other hand, with the development of the new modern communication channels, including social media, we are witnessing actually a sort of revolution when it comes to the perception of forest management, of the role of forestry by the society at large. At the same time, you know, we traditionally also state forestry services used to be focused on its main purpose and reason for being, that was the management of forest ecosystems and making them continuously growing, developing, resilient in the long run, and then definitely not shrinking. So we also have to undergo certain revolution when it comes even to the skills to inform society, and then to be able to, on the one hand, to respond to the growing societal expectations, but on the other hand, you know, the skills to explain actually what are we doing in forests and why actually in this way, not in the other, is another story. So communication gets more and more attention and gets more and more importance. Just briefly to to give you, and maybe also referring to what Mr. Delgado Rosa mentioned, that now probably it's the time to transfer a little bit, or to turn from traditionally wood-based use forestry into something that leads us towards benefiting from the other functions. Of course, but at the same time, we have to clearly explain to people, to let them understand why we do manage forests, because, you know, forestry, especially in state forests, it's per se not for logging. Logging is only I would say, a part of a variety of silvicultural operations, and very often before the forest is mature enough to even to go with the final cut, understood as the logging by the most of us, we have to introduce a number of operations which are also which we call tending operations, the purpose of which is to keep the forest growing, to keep the forest vital, to keep the forest resilient. But we also log trees in the meantime, sometimes thinner, sometimes thicker, different number, in different way this extraction takes place. So altogether, I believe that one of the biggest challenges today is to explain to people that even if they see that there is logging going on, it does not necessarily mean deforestation, overexploitation, or kind of negative impact on forestry, because this is how silviculture has been organized. But then I also wanted to say that all what I'm saying is a part of like connecting vessel system. So we have to invest in part of the asset. We have to make a benefit in another part of the asset in order to be able to deliver in the third or fourth spot. So if we lose this kind of understanding, this holistic global understanding of the whole forestry system, then we most probably won't be able to either to explain well or either to deliver in the future, because, you know, also climate challenge is a big challenge today, but it's not only for the society, this challenge. This challenge is also for us. We need to adapt forests to the changing climatic conditions, and the way to adapt them is by applying scientifically based and well kind of thoroughly thought and then well planned silvicultural measures, because this is the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this explanation. It reminds me a little bit of I think during the opening statements yesterday morning, I think it was either Mr. Palahi or Mr. Ramstein, I think one of the two, made the statement that we as a society, we need to stop looking at forests through fossil fuel-based lenses, basically, and need to look with completely different eyes at forests. And I think you're absolutely right that communication is going to be key in that, engaging with the public, right? Shall we perhaps take a step to Mr. Soares? You have been an active member, in fact, of all the sessions so far. So perhaps the question for you then is, there have been so many challenges for non-wood forest products that we have been discussing earlier today, but yesterday as well. So especially in the 3 sessions we had so far, there were challenges basically at each topic that was being considered. But if we take the perspective of private forest owners, what do you think is then probably the biggest challenge that private forest owners are facing? Could you elaborate on that?
Well, Stephen, it's not easy to pick up the challenge, but I think I have some ideas that I could try to put from the perspective of the private forest owner. And there is a challenge regarding non-wood forest products, is to find a balanced approach between allowing the society to enjoy these products. And we have been discussing some of those examples, like picking up mushrooms or berries for family consumption, but getting the balance about providing also a possible resource of revenue to the forest owner and respecting forest ownership's rights. And such balanced approach must be found at a national or regional level, as it depends a lot, and we've been discussing that, on the culture, on the history and legislation already in place in different member states. But another challenge is to improve the knowledge of the value of these non-wood forest products. Over the last years, they have gained importance for the society. And as we've discussed a lot during the forum, we need to get more insights on their value that could help to communicate to the public and find the balance that I mentioned above. But here I have to come back to my personal experience again. And in some non-wood forest products, we can discuss many key challenges during the value chain. But if we don't focus enough on adaptation and mitigation to climate change and the consequences to abiotic and biotic challenges, then the oscillation in what concerns quantity and quality of the supply of some non-wood product forests might put in risk the future of the market of some of those products. And I can talk for experience in what concerns cork and pinus nuts quality and quantity. So I do consider that adaptation and mitigation is one of the most important key challenges for some private forest owners, considering that challenges are different from one country to another, and that climate change affects now more some non-wood product forests and countries than others. So this is pretty much one of the key challenges that I think we are facing nowadays.
Thank you. So, well, if you look at this different perspective, it's very clear that engaging with stakeholders, building this trust with these actors and involving them in decision-making or preparing for decision-making is quite a clear challenge. There is indeed the challenge of data, and I think that these two first have clearly been backed up by the survey we did just before lunch, where these items of data availability, etc., had a clearly high score when we asked people on the importance or the impact, the estimated impact of measures in that direction. So this is clearly, again, restating the same challenge. The issue of communication basically goes in the same direction. And then we have indeed these challenges related to, on the one hand, forest ownership rights, but then climate change, mitigation, adaptation. It's very clear that there's a lot that can be done at the national level, as we heard from Mrs. Stephanie, and for sure it involves working together also at the regional level, but at the same time, it's abundantly clear that you can only do so much at the national level, and that many of these issues probably need to be taken up at a higher level, which brings me back to Mr. Delgado Rosa. So if you look at all these challenges, I mean, many of these touch upon the core of natural capital, your policy area. So, well, how do you then look at the challenges? Or what is the challenge that you face then? Could you explain us?
Yes, some challenges are actually the same as referred by other speakers, but let me start where is the main challenge. And the main challenge is that we keep eroding our natural capital. water, air, land, the soil, and taking it for granted as if it is eternal, or as if we don't need to take it into account. It will just be there. And this ecological crisis I've referred is an evidence that we are going too far in destroying the basis of sustainable development, which is the biosphere, the environment. So we are in this situation, let's say, in terms of challenges, is addressing this, namely from the side of climate change, that's well up in the political agenda for long and public attention. But there's a new sister challenge that came in, which is biodiversity loss, which is now getting as crucial to tackle as climate, and which are intertwined. You cannot address climate without addressing nature and vice versa. So the main challenge, I would say, is we have now this duty to tackle biodiversity loss. We want the EU to lead. The EU leads by example. That's why we have now EU biodiversity strategy for 2030 that I do think it's the most ambitious the world has ever seen, and that the EU will promote it irrespectively of what happens internationally, as to set the example. Now, where's the challenge? The challenge is the main drivers of biodiversity loss are now well known and ranked. The first one is land use change, and by the way, sea use change also. The second is overexploitation. The third is climate change itself. The fourth is pollution of all kinds, and the fifth is invasive alien species. So how can one, from a biodiversity policy angle, address all this? That is the challenge. And in terms of land use, of course, forests do have an advantage in forestry, which is if you want to manage them sustainable, you need to have a long-term perspective that favors sustainability. But this is far from saying that everywhere on forests, including European forests, we have sustainability. We have faced many cases, namely in agriculture, but also in forestry, of an increased intensification that does take a toll on the environment, on biodiversity particularly, and some of the ecosystem services. So what we are now trying to steer, and this cannot be done without stakeholders for sure, is approaches to forestry that do allow to extract everything we need from them, including wood, but in a way that is closer to nature and under biodiversity criteria that allow this replenishment and maintenance also of nature and biodiversity. So this approach to nature-based solutions, natural climate solutions kicking in, is something that is getting more important. I can also say we need to give more space for nature for our own sake. That's why you will find in the biodiversity strategy reference to increasing protected areas. Protected areas can be perfectly adaptable or managed in such a way as to keep using the territory in a way that is adequate for nature conservation. Non-forest food products are relatively easily to adapt to this approach. We are also coming in with restoration targets this year in a legally binding initiative announced in the biodiversity strategy, and these are an example of challenges. Maybe I could still say a final word on this issue of communication and awareness. I do think it's a big challenge, a very important one. For instance, I find it concerning to find some millennials, some young people, that treat tree cutting as something that should never be done. And this very obviously does not make sense. So that's an approach on explaining what is a forest, what it means. But this goes on both ways. We also need to communicate with foresters and the forest owners these new approaches from society on climate and biodiversity, namely explaining that when we speak nature conservation in forests, that's still management. It's not something different from it. And sometimes we see this split too marked between the two communities, and we should bridge the gap. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your explanation. Well, this almost closes this first part, and we would definitely make enough make sure that we have enough time to talk about policy actions and the white paper. But we noticed that there is a question coming in, and we have time perhaps for only one question. And I would like to hand the word to Enrico, who's going to ask a question on farm to fork, I suppose. But Enrico, there's only time for one question, because I see that you have already other questions as well. So let's go for that question on farm to fork. Enrico, please. It's a question from one of the attendees, one of the panel. Enrico?
Oh, no, wait a second. Sorry, because of the mask for the COVID. Anyway, I would like to ask I don't know, whoever can answer. So a couple of questions. So the first one is, how can we deal with the free access to the picker and the fully private forest ownership? I mean, if there are no pickers that goes inside the forest to collect mushroom, truffle, medicinal aromatic plants, berries, and whatever, how can the supply chain be sustained on the economical point of view? If the forest owner want to have the largest piece of the value of the chain will disappear right immediately. Second point.
No, let's do this and only one question, because otherwise it's going to be too complicated. So who would like to who would like to respond to this question? Would that be perhaps something for Mr. Soares?
Well, I can address the final part of the question, and that's very important. It's a matter of value chain. And if you consider the value chain that we have for many of the non-wood forest products, it is definitely not on the forest owner the biggest part of the value chain. So I think it's a difference. I think that it must be well distributed. I think it should be a win-win for everyone in the sector. But definitely, and if we consider, for instance, cork or the pinus nuts, it's definitely not the large part of the revenue. It's not on the private owner. Of course, it needs to be well distributed so that the private owner that it's indeed responsible for the sustainable forest management and to create the habitats that could give a supply of quality and quantity or for the future of the non-wood forest products that we are considered. Of course, it needs to be some interest in economical interests to make sure that the environmental and the social sustainability is granted. Because if not, we will see things that we see in many parts of Europe, that it's a forest abandoned, it's a forest that it's not managed, it's a forest that it's totally devastated by wildfires, and it's totally that some parts, even in Portugal, I could say that a huge part of the Portuguese forest, no one knows who's the ownership, because if there is not a distribution of revenue on the non-wood forest products, it will be a lack of management. So I don't consider that the big part it's on the forest owner.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Soares. I know, Enrico, you have many more questions, but I need to be very selective because we still have a lot of things to do and I need to manage time. My apologies for that. I see Mr. Sven Walter has also raised his hand. Perhaps a very short question and a very short answer.
I try to be very short. We talked about a lot of challenges, but the main challenge maybe of today was not addressed, the global pandemic. So my question would be if any of the panelists would have examples on how the pandemic influenced the non-wood forest product sectors, such as cork, and how it could contribute to building back better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Now, who wants to respond to this in a very short way, please?
Well, I can just respond that when it was the first wave, we were very, very concerned about the restrictions of people going to work on farms, in the forests, and especially because much of the manpower comes from other countries that not the ones where the extraction is being made. But well, since the extraction of cork, it's done in the summer, we caught that that flat line of the COVID so it was not a big issue. But for instance, now we are collecting from the trees the pinus nuts, and we are facing problems to get manpower to do that. It's at least from this part of manpower, it's a problem, even though it depends on the seasonality of the non-wood forest product that we are talking about. But of course, that the break that we have in the economy and in the cork it's pretty much affected by the economy. So of course there is a difference in the value chain to everyone.
Okay, thank you so much. I see that also Piotr Borkowski has raised his hand. So the short answer from your side, please.
Thank you very much. Very shortly, also state forest organizations got under the impact. And then I would say it was kind of double kind impact. On the one hand, we got under the same lockdown restrictions as the others. And then Antonio already referred to the manpower. And then we are also employing contractors or workers. So that was also customers. The supply chains got under the impact of COVID. But another more social related result of the COVID was that more people started using maybe not exactly non-wood products, but these ecosystem services and forest functions. We could observe even, around Brussels in the famous Forêt de Soignes, quite high penetration of citizens of Brussels inhabitants who are benefiting from this resource because they have limitations somewhere else. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you also for being short, because I have to do some time management, and I suggest we just move on with our panel debate and introduce the second block. And after having explored your perspectives and understanding these challenges that have been discussed, so the question obviously is, it's good to know the challenges, but then we need to decide on what needs to happen, right? And in the white paper that Ignacio has introduced, we have a list of policy actions. So there are several sections, each containing a number of very clear suggestions, and many of these have been discussed this morning and even yesterday. And we had a voting process on that. And these policy actions are in the domain of securing the conservation and sustainable supply of non-wood forest products. It's about building competitive and equitable value chains. It's about the transparency, data and information flows on non-wood forest products. And it's about creating these enabling conditions, which is basically a kind of a container argument, if you like, for coherence of institutional action, financial support, support innovation, knowledge transfer, capacity building, things like this. So enabling conditions, I would say. Now, I would like to hear from you, knowing your challenges that you are faced with basically in the perspective that you present, what do you think needs to happen, and how does it link to this white paper? Is there a specific set of actions that you say, yes, from our perspective, it needs to be predominantly that part of the action that has priority, or maybe it's something completely different? Let's check with all of you. Could we start perhaps with Mrs. Polyakova?
Thank you, Stephen, very much. I'd like to congratulate you with very comprehensive and very useful white paper, first of all. I think that all actions provided are relevant. From my perspective, I think that we should start, first of all, from raising awareness about the importance of non-wood forest products and benefits for state enterprises for increasing use of it. Then, of course, when we will have a good view and we will be able to encourage state forest enterprises to better use non-wood forest products, we will need enable condition. Of course, we need to encourage forest authorities to support forest enterprises and create some kind of incentives. And then again, what is stated in your white paper, we need to look into markets. access to market, as well as to promote products received from non-wood forest products. Of course, it's still an issue, especially for Ukraine. I know that our enterprises producing different types of products, they are facing significant problem with entering market and selling their products. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now let's immediately switch to Mrs. Stefani. So if you consider this Italian level, the challenges, but also the achievements, and then if you look at this white paper with these policy actions, are there actions that you say, yes, this would really help us in Italy to even take this next step and achieve achieve the next step, so to speak? Could you give a comment on that?
Sì, ho trovato il libro bianco molto interessante, ricco e denso
white paper was very interesting and dense. I agree with a lot of the suggestions of the white paper, and Italian reality is well represented in the white paper. So I don't know, I can choose among the suggestions because they're all interesting. But I think that as far as Italy is concerned, we have a very big problem of unknown owners, and it's very difficult to identify specific policies in this sense, because very often the owners, forest owners, do not know that they actually own that forest. In terms, because we have problems with heritage, also for small pieces of land, small portions of forest. So the first point, which is very interesting for Italy, is to imagine some supply chain agreements between owners, foragers, users, processors, and the ways in which, and the places, and to establish the places where these agreements can take place in order to have an aggregation process together with the value chain in order to have an effective communication about the peculiarities of each territory. The supply chain agreements are a new thing in Italy. It worked so far successfully in agriculture. But if a recovery resilience national plan, which is being discussed in Italy over the last days, if it will remain, we will have funds to expand experience of the supply chain agreements in the forest and fishery sectors. A second aspect, which is fundamental, is the transmission of knowledge and skill and competencies. We have skills in the harvesting, in the processing that must be given value. We have to transmit those skills to new generations, and we need incentives. Youngsters should be interested to do something if they want them to work in this field. But this transmission of knowledge, of skills, is fundamental in order to hold on to this, to the values that are represented by our sector. But at the same time, younger generation can make the products more attractive because they have the skills to do so. They can use technology. And on the other hand, we should consider the global aspect represented by the possibilities of a sustainable management of forests and their multifunctionality. So we have areas for timber production, for example, and we have to do this without having a deep negative impact on the places where we do this. So in Italy, we have to do something more to promote the reality of the forests in all our territories, according to a long-term plan, which we identified as the best one. For example, hills which are not too big nor too small. In this way, we think that in the new pack, a big chapter, a great chapter of this perspective, the next 7 years should be dedicated to this product that give value to our supply chain and identify the challenges of the from farm to fork under a new perspective, but a perspective that can give value and improvement.
You were also referring to this importance of maintaining the competences, and it beautifully links to the messages stated by Mr. Chamberlain yesterday on the legacy. It's a heritage matter, basically. It's about culture, and we should cherish this. So this is very clear. So thank you for your position on this. Mr. Soares, I would like to turn to you now, and perhaps could you switch hats in the sense that could you share with us the role that the civil group on forestry could play? Because yes, we discussed this, bringing in stakeholders at the national level. Italy was a beautiful example on this, but you're doing something similar, I would say, with the civil dialogue, the civil group on forestry. How could this play a role in this policy actions? Could you share your opinion on this with us, please?
Well, at the moment, and despite their relevance, non-wood forest products are rather missing from the EU political agenda. And these have not been addressed recently at CDG, at least since I'm a chair, despite some information that is being given by the agroforest stakeholders. But they could be discussed if in line with the EU political agenda. This forum was, and it is, of course, a perfect opportunity to bring this topic to the debate. So the CDG could possibly discuss on this topic and recommendations if they are related to the ongoing EU policy developments. As an example, I do consider that the discussion of non-wood forest products could be part of the more general discussion on ecosystem services and the possible payments. And we had yesterday the presentation of Mr. Mauro Ponelli that made a very clear presentation on the importance of non-wood forest products in many EU policies, but especially in what concerns the CDG in the new EU forest strategy. Namely, he described what concerns the multifunctional role of forests, the importance of eco-services, provision of food and medicinal materials, and especially the role of sustainable forest management, among others. And considering this, I do think that during the discussion of the new EU forest strategy in the CDG, that we could see in the agenda the role of non-wood forest products in this new strategy discussion. And we cannot forget that the CDG is named Forestry and Cork. So it's clear the importance given by DG Agri to this subject. So let's see the development of this important policy forum that we are finishing today on the future implementation in the several EU policies that could consider a major role to non-wood forest products by improving the one that it's being dedicated so far.
Well, thank you for your openness to consider this the inclusion of non-wood forest products as an area on which also the civil group could play a role. So that's very, very welcome, I would say. Now, perhaps let's take a look at Mr. Borkowski now. if you look at, from your perspective, at these policy actions, many things have already been said, and it seems that many of us are going to agree with these policy actions. But if there would be a priority that you would be selecting out of these, because they are of particular, because it would be of particular relevance for state forests, basically, what type of action or which action would that be?
Thank you very much. Indeed, a lot of has been said already of really good examples and arguments. What I would say, one of the key issues to solve also for the future, especially looking from the European or EU perspective, would be to further work for consistency and coherence in policymaking. And that's why, for example, in EUSTAFOR, we are attaching so much attention today, and we have so many expectations from the upcoming forest strategy that the Commission is currently working on. Why I'm saying, of course, since forests are very much different depending from or in which biogeographical region we look at them, they have been regulated by sometimes quite different national or even subnational regional legislation. And however, what the EU could, and I mean, has been contributing with was this kind of subsidiarity and additionality for all those elements where certain coordinated action among the member states would be required. Also, acting on a certain common platform to exchange, to make benchmarking, to share experiences, then the strategy would be the perfect solution. And of course, when we refer to the strategy, we refer to certain guiding policy document. But then the consequence of the strategy, for example, is that there are certain dialogue platforms functioning under it, which are coordinated, for example, by the European Commission. And then I can only concert with Antonio, who said that let's hope that the new strategy will give like a new impetus also for, among others, this civil dialogue group on forestry and cork, which will be even more efficiently than so far used by the Commission, by us, also for the member states. For example, there is the Standing Forestry Committee. So I believe that these structures should and could be even make more like playing their role, and then for the benefit of all of us. Very quickly, maybe if I can refer to these actions, which are then somehow highlighted in the white paper, but also in the manifesto. Of course, the first of it is conservation and sustainable supply of non-wood forest products. I would say that since these non-wood forest products are a part of the entire forestry system, I would even say that even more important is that to develop and sustainably supply these non-wood forest products in the future. Because, you know, conservation is a sort of passive meaning of the whole, whereas we need to mobilize even more than today. And then we can, and there is a great potential to mobilize now these non-wood forest products from sustainably managed forests. And then it was also a lot said about the proper means for valuation. And then when it comes to kind of scientific description of the whole concept of payments for ecosystem services, I think this part is quite advanced. We need now to see the workable, implementable means to put this into the practice. And then why I'm saying, especially for us, and then I understand that there are different approaches or certain differences even among the different ownership types. What we would like to see from the state forest perspective, we don't need based forestry systems on subsidies, because that would be rather kind of not long-term looking. Whereas what we need is only to guarantee that everywhere where, for example, we will be expected to withdraw from certain action which is related to generating income from timber sale, we need workable solution to replace this part of the income, sometimes maybe by certain compensation, even in short term, to allow us to turn into the new systems, because we cannot deviate from healthy economies in forestry. And last point I wanted to make, it will be a little bit also what Mr. Delgado Rosa said, that now we are sort of witnessing the eroding of natural capital. I would say yes and no, and that's why we need very good information systems and good data to base the policy analysis and the future setting of future objectives on. Because, for example, over recent weeks, I could see even on Twitter or on other channels, in Spain, last 100 of years, tremendous increase of forest resources. In France as well. Yesterday, we had the discussion, internal discussion in EUSTAFOR in Latvia, tremendous development of forests over the last 100 of years. So it's not only like we are eroding the natural capital, but then when planning for the future, also how to face the climate challenge, we have also think about kind of equal distribution of burdens among the sectors, who should do what to make the full contribution to this overall objective of climate fit Europe 2050. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Piotr. Well, it's very clear. If we are talking policy actions, sooner or later we are going to end up at the European level or at the level of the European Commission, obviously. Now, yesterday we had Mr. Poinelli with us, and he was quite available, and we were so pleased that he could be with us to explain, basically to depict this political landscape of this upcoming, the existing, but also the upcoming strategies. And this was very useful and very interesting for us. But my question to you, Mr. Delgado Rosa, would perhaps be, could you elaborate or explain how you feel these actions of the white paper would fit with these upcoming strategies?
Yes, I would like to address that, give you some telegrams on the actions, and if time allows, I see a couple of questions in the chat directed to me that in the end I would also like to tackle. So I would say several elements of the white paper that captured my attention. Those that relate to sustainable use are important for us, sustainable use of non-wood forest products, namely, for instance, ensuring that people that harvest do have the knowledge and expertise to harvest responsibly. So this sustainable harvesting is a very fundamental aspect, including from not having negative impacts on forest biodiversity. There's also an issue that I think is very diversified, which is the variety of regulations on access and harvesting rights in the different member states. We don't know what are the good ones or bad ones, of course, but having a bit of a list, an overview of these different approaches and what they imply can be relevant for us. I would also refer that we are aware of the impacts of climate change on vegetation zones, on forest risks and deliverables, and the EU adaptation strategy is taking a look into this precisely. Now, on information, of course, information will be a key element of the forest strategy for sure. We have set up this forest information system for Europe that was launched last year in an international forest conference. And indeed, I can tell you that I can imagine data on non-wood forest products included also in this system. Then on funding, I do think that's a very important enabling condition. We have already a program, the LIFE program, which is the environment and climate specific EU program that has funded projects on resins, truffles, cork oak forests, ecotourism, etc. But I do think it's very important to keep watch on the rural development programs. And this is because, you know, this is within the common agriculture policy, and forests is not agriculture, and sometimes it risks falling between the cracks. So we are very interested on having information and ideas on how we can tackle better forest investments in rural development. And finally, as a point that was also in the initial presentation, this issue of nature and landscape conservation and how it links to forests. For us, it's very important that indeed forests can be managed, used and harvested, but also in protected areas in a way which can be adapted to the conservation objectives of the area, which we think is easy to get. Now, I would, if you allow me, reply to the two questions in the chat. One is on the how do we perceive the risks of land management abandonment, namely in the Mediterranean context. I would say, well, when we say Mediterranean forests do not face threats from intensification, it depends of the view. If you imagine even-aged monocultures of exotic species for timber production, that's rather intensification. It can be managed, of course, to reduce risks, but it cannot avoid impacts. And in some cases, we just have some private owners that have put some fast-growing trees, hoping that they grow, and then the forest fire comes in. So I still see a link with the intensification possible. But it's very important what was said in the question, which is land management as a risk. I would say it's ecosystem management or bad ecosystem management that is the risk, because where we see a loss of risk, namely for forest fires in Mediterranean context, is when we don't have any longer a resilient ecosystem with all its components. We have pines, shrubs, land abandonment, eucalyptus, and then the climate conditions get worse. So I think we need to revisit the ecosystem in fauna and flora. Remember, getting back to cork. Cork is a product of fire. That's the cork tree evolved to have cork because the fire is an element in Mediterranean ecosystems. So we need to put back the kind of Mediterranean ecosystems that are resilient enough. Maybe my final point is the second question on active management as the way forward. Let's say, I would put it this way, and there are two extreme views related to nature and forests. One extreme view is only when there's no human, we have value. Nature knows better. That's wrong. The second extreme view, only when you have human hands actively managing and intervening, we have value. And that's also wrong. It's actually a spectrum. It depends on what you want from the forest and the context. Nature conservation is not passive management. It's a different approach to management, which can be also pretty active. Thank you.
Thank you so much also for taking up these questions. Well, in fact, I really have the feeling that it would be quite easy for us in the panel to just keep on talking for at least another hour. The topic is fascinating. It's clear that all of you have so many stories, so many insights, and you're willing to share them with all of us. And that's very clear and very beautiful also to be part of this. Unfortunately, I have to look at the time. The clock is telling me what it is telling me, and I have to take that into account. And I see there are still many comments in the chat, so people definitely agree with the messages all of you have bringing. You know that there is going to be this manifesto as a document. We don't have the time anymore to explore on this, but I would definitely like to ask all of you to consider the document, to consider it, see where the value of it, how this could be put at best use from your perspective, because that's definitely the purpose of creating such a document, not a document for the sake of having a document, but because we would like to make and state and mobilize actors to basically help the non-wood forest products value chains. So with that being said, I would like to offer my sincere thanks to all 5 panel members. It was not only the time that you spent here with us the afternoon, many of you have decided to also observe, be part of the previous sessions in this panel forum. You were all available for just these conversations we had to get to know each other, explore the topics and the messages. All this is part of being a panel member, but it means it's not just this 1 hour, it's much more. We are well aware of that. We are well aware that all of you have very busy agendas. So we really appreciated your presence. And I would like to really thank you, all 5 of you. Thank you for being part of this panel discussion. And as this is now the end of the panel debate, I suggest we take a very short break and that we look at a couple of these very short videos we have, because they just offer so nice insights and they depict the reality of these non-wood forest products. Gerard, whenever you're ready to launch a video, just go ahead.
Encontramos-nos na zona norte de Vinhais, em plena área protegida do Parque Natural de Montezinho. Nesta zona, situada na terra fria transmontana, a agricultura e a floresta ainda caminham lado a lado.
Na nossa opinião, grande parte do potencial desta região reside no aproveitamento multifuncional dos espaços florestais.
O castanheiro tem um elevado peso na economia local.
Os concelhos de Vinhais e Bragança são os maiores produtores de castanha a nível nacional, o que faz com que esta cultura seja a mais representativa na região.
O carvalho negral é fundamental para a manutenção de inúmeras espécies de fauna e flora, como sejam os animais de caça maior, javali, corso e veado, ou espécies arbustivas e herbáceas de orla de bosque.
Estes ecossistemas são propícios à realização de várias atividades.
A associação destes ecossistemas levou a que o mel do Parque Natural de Montezinho fosse classificado como uma das 7 maravilhas doces de Portugal. Também aqui as abelhas são uma grande ajuda aos agricultores na polinização dos seus frutos.
Nos chodos e carvalhais são várias as espécies de cogumelos que a população recolhe, seja para consumo próprio, seja para venda.
No que diz respeito ao turismo, várias são as atividades que se podem desenvolver em torno deste recurso.
Acreditamos que são estes produtos, com origem nestes ecossistemas, que oferecem muitas oportunidades para o desenvolvimento local. Nós somos uma pequena empresa familiar, atualmente a trabalhar o mel e a castanha longal, uma variedade de castanha nacional.
Venham conhecer a nossa terra, visitem!
And then perhaps a final video so that we all can take a little bit of air before we move to the last part of this panel forum, this policy forum. Gerard? If not, Gerard? Excellent, thank you. Thank you so much, Gerard, for showing these videos. Again, as stated before, we have a collection of these, and we certainly intend to use these for other purposes as well. So, but we wanted to share this with you and also to provide a short break, if you like, after this quite long panel debate. Now, before we move back and reconsider or revisit the manifesto, there is one final new speaker I would like to introduce to you. It is Mr. Shadi Mohana. He is the Director of Rural Development and Natural Resources from the Ministry of Agriculture of Lebanon. He is also the Chair of Silva Mediterranea. Mr. Shadi Mohana, I would like to welcome you and give you the floor to deliver a presentation on bridging on future initiatives. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen, and good afternoon, good evening for all of you. It's a real pleasure to see all of you. I see Ignacio here waving, and it's really a pleasure to see a lot of you, even virtually, hoping that we will have the opportunity soon to meet live. So I will try to share my screen. I hope it is it working?
It is working, but it's not the presentation mode yet, but it's working.
No, it's not the presentation yet?
It's yes, but not in presentation mode. It's not full screen.
Ah, okay.
Yes, that's better. Please.
Okay, great. So allow me to speak a little bit about the non-wood forest product in the Mediterranean. Some basic statistics that I think most of you know, but I will try to recall for that. So basically, the Mediterranean forests, based on the statistics of 2001, have a value of around 130 euros per hectare. Around 35% of this value is for wood forest products, 10% for grazing, and only 9% to a non-wood forest product. Unfortunately, these numbers are not well distributed all over the Mediterranean. So if you take, for example, in Europe, those numbers are low. But if you go to the southern part of the Mediterranean or the eastern part of the Mediterranean, where the forests are not really or highly productive in terms of wood, then you will see that the non-wood forest products are have a much higher value than the one stated here. And another thing is that in developing countries, 80% of the populations, they just in a way or another live or have a good health by using the non-wood forest products. So it has a real socioeconomic importance in developing countries. Also, in the developed, let's say, countries where we have large-scale industrial processing, the non-wood forest products are there to provide high value products, like we've seen the cork and some other cosmetics like the argan, etc. So we need to keep in mind that the concept of forestry just being for wood and pulp is really limiting to the development of Mediterranean forests. FAO has been doing a lot of work in the countries in order to develop in a way or another the value chains in some non-wood forest products. A lot of work has been done in Algeria, for example, for the cork, some medicinal and aromatic plants. And there we've seen that the value of the non-wood forest product was much higher than what we've seen as an average of the Mediterranean. In Mauritania, in Morocco, where we have the argan oil that has started to be a wide industrial product in the cosmetics. In Tunisia, with the mastic tree oil and some essential oil from medicinal and aromatic plants is very well developed. In Portugal, we all know, and we've seen it with the panelists, that the cork oak is really the champion of the non-wood forest product in the area. I take the case of my country. In Lebanon, we have the Pinus pinea, which is called now the white gold of Lebanon, and the carob, which is used mainly for the carob molasses, which is kind of jam that is highly appreciated in the area. So what is needed to be done? I don't know if you're familiar with the Mediterranean Forest Weeks that happens every 2 years, and we've been already into six editions of the Mediterranean Forest Week. The last one was in Brumana exactly 2 years ago. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we couldn't do one this year, but we hope that we will be doing it very soon. So in the Agadir, which was, I think, the 5th edition of the Mediterranean Forest Week, there was a commitment by the countries participating there to rehabilitate around 8 million hectares. And among those rehabilitation standards, the non-wood forest products has a major role to play, mainly because they contribute providing sustainable value chain and supporting FLR efforts. The country is also committed to increase resilience to help the forest be adapting to climate change in the Mediterranean, and also to promote and enhance food security in the Mediterranean drylands. Now we come to the real role of Silva Mediterranea, which is a statutory body of FAO dealing with the forestry issues in the Mediterranean. So Silva Mediterranea is able to play the role of a platform of exchange of practices in the Mediterranean and support the stakeholders to increase the impact on the ground to achieve the SDGs. SDG 1, 2, against the one against hunger, SDG 15. A lot of SDGs could be tackled in a way or another by the non-wood forest products development. Also, the group, the Silva Mediterranea, should play a role of facilitator or catalyzer in order to have real viable value chains of the non-wood forest product. Interregional partnerships should be integrated in order to have legal and sustainable value chains. Exchange of data, exchange of knowledge and good practices is essential for a good development of the non-wood forest product. Among other working groups that we have in Silva Mediterranea, we have a working group called the Non-Wood Forest Product Working Group. It used to be the Cork working group, but we have upgraded it since 10 years ago, I think, to a more larger scope, which is the non-wood forest products. Unfortunately, it has been few time that this group is a bit really on a lethargic, let's say, or in coma. So we commit here to dynamize it with the assistance of the new secretariat of SilvaMed at FAO to really put some energy, revitalize this working group. And I invite the countries that are here with us today to really support and take the responsibilities in reviving this working group. We're also to be considered as a real committed partner to support implementation of recommendations of this workshop and of the white paper. If we want to look to the future initiatives, well, at the present time, most of the forest management plans do not take the non-wood forest product as an essential. And Mrs. Stefani just mentioned it, that in Italy, they are doing this recently, and this is something very good to be taken as an example for the other countries. So having an inventory of the non-wood forest product is essential in our forest management plans. Branding and labeling is also something very important. When you say the argan, we directly go to Morocco. I spoke about the Pinus pinea, the pine nuts of Lebanon. You can have some geographic standards also to have in these kind of products. The creation of consortium. We spoke about the exchange of successful case studies, exchange of experience, which is essential for the development, the fast development of non-wood forest product. They are essential in a lot of countries, as I said before. The private initiative is essential, and we need to provide the small producers. We've seen just a video now about the chestnut producers and the honey producers. These kind of initiatives are essential to be subsidized in a way or another, assisted through grants or credits or microcredits. Otherwise, it is difficult for these kind of initiatives to really reach the high standard that is needed. Marketing strategies and training are essential. You know, we all thrive to get organic agricultural products, organic tomato, organic fruits, organic. We can easily sell our non-wood forest product as organic product. They are naturally organic. We don't use pesticides. We don't use fertilizers to produce mushrooms or truffles or pine nuts or other products. So this is something that should be really taken into consideration, this organic label of those products. And if we want to, let's say, develop more, we need to facilitate the exchange between the countries of the Mediterranean. So reducing some administrative and regulative barriers is very essential to this process. Promoting the citizens' engagement. You know, Mrs. Polyakova mentioned that in Ukraine, these products are free to be collected. It is also in many other countries. So we need to legalize in a way or another and promote the citizens that these products need to be collected in a sustainable way. They need to remain available for the next generations. New market opportunities should be created. You know, we mentioned that Europe is a big consumer of non-wood forest products without being a big producer, because the European forests are mainly dedicated for pulp and wood, which is the opposite of what we've seen in the eastern part and the southern part of the Mediterranean. So these exchanges can be very good for the developing countries, where they would be able to export some of their products. And we should not forget that, as I said it before, these, if we put some investment in the non-wood forest product, it would be essential to help reaching the SDGs, multiple SDGs 1, 2, 8, if I recall well, and of course the SDG 15. And now I'm reaching the end of this presentation. I would like to highlight what we'll be talking about, the manifesto, which is really our, it should be kind of master plan for us in order to move forward in the development of the non-wood forest product. And with that, I would like to thank you for listening, for inviting me to really give some ideas about what Silva Mediterranea can do and in the non-wood forest products. I hope I did not go beyond my 7 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohana, for offering us yet another perspective from a key stakeholder as well, pointing towards this working group, connecting also many of your comments to statements that have been made throughout this policy forum. Normally, especially looking at the time, I don't think we can take questions, but if it is Ignacio raising his hand, I think it is fair to say that he has a special position in this forum. So please, Ignacio.
No, just to say thank you, Shadi. Thank you very much for this overview and for throwing also your own priorities and your own views on this. There's one aspect that you mentioned at the end that I want to ask you if you could develop a bit. You mentioned about exchange, knowledge exchange, about better integration in the Mediterranean region. Our white paper is focusing a lot to Europe, but we're conscious that Europe is also importing as a key partner for many countries in the Silva Mediterranean, in Eastern and Southern Mediterranean. So in this call for action, how can Europe better develop this Euro-Mediterranean region, and what could Europe do best to improve this integration that you were mentioning across the basin? Thank you.
A short response, please.
Yeah, I'll be very, very brief. You know, I think we can work on two levels. The first is exchange of knowledge, you know, between Europe and the developed people that have, and we have started having some expertise in that. For example, some of our colleagues in Lebanon and other countries, they went to Spain and they learned the grafting of Pinus pinea, which was something that existing, and it helped a lot now developing this product. Also, we should know and try to limit the barriers, as I said, of exchange, because the European standards are sometimes too much difficult for the other countries in order to be able to export those. So I think a common understanding of what is needed could help a lot in getting a compromise between the countries.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. I'm looking at the time, and I think we really need to proceed now with what is going to be the final part of this policy forum. So I turn to Sven Walter. At the beginning of this policy forum, you have introduced this document, the manifesto. We have invited all attendees to take a closer look at the document, state perhaps some opinions, make some suggestions, etc. We have restated our question to continue to bring in these suggestions throughout the policy forum. But now I'm looking at you. Can you tell us what is the type of suggestions that have come in and what does it mean for the manifesto? Do we need to write a completely new manifesto, or tell us?
Thank you very much, Stephen. And I don't think that we need a new master plan or a new manifesto of Alghero, to get the name right this time. But really, thank you very much for the inputs we got. We got many, and we also tried to respond to the different colleagues who submitted their proposals. And so let me just share with you also my screen and give you a little and a quick update. I hope you can see the manifesto, Stephen.
Yes, it's excellent.
So, excellent. So let me first say again that when it comes to the scope, that we were aiming at a manifesto which targets Europe, but in a global perspective. Meaning we heard very much from, Europe being also a main importer of non-wood forest products. We just heard from Chadi on the relevance and the linkages to the Silver Mediterranean and of course to other regions. And by the way, that is of course for us of being an FAO, very important that we see this in the global context. And that's what we would like to also summarize in the manifesto. I then added, or we added actually, some of the comments we received, and I left it here by purpose in track changes so that the colleagues and participants can see what has been done and what has been introduced. Again, we tried to keep the document concise. We do not want to duplicate, obviously, the white paper, but we took note that some more products must be and should be added, and there were some concrete proposals. We also added a reference to the Mediterranean region. Also, it is, of course, a European scope which we are having, but we know that through the Incredible, we have a strong reference to the Mediterranean there. And also, as I mentioned yesterday, while talking about the importance of forests as a source of non-wood forest products, we highlighted also the link to the agricultural lands, which again is very important, in particular for the Mediterranean region. We got a confirmation on the SDGs and on the scope with regard to the policies, and I think the panel discussion was very clear about the potential of mainstreaming non-wood forest products in these policies. We highlighted, again, in addition to healthy food, also it should also be healthy food, the high quality gastronomy, which is an interesting market. And I think also today, there were many references to what Davide called the associated regulatory and cultural services. And so we wanted to highlight the tourism, which came through at different types. And again, not that we wanted to highlight it, but it came from you, from the participants who actually requested to make these references in. Also here to highlight the viability of solutions, meaning also thinking about the socio and economic sustainability to strike for was highlighted. We then have a section talking about weaknesses and threats. And while we acknowledge the importance of the informal sector, the proposal has been made to focus in particular on the illegal side of trade and to address it. When we're talking about Europe as a leading importer, we are highlighting here the risk, but obviously we know that we can also highlight the opportunities as that Europe comes and plays in this regard. And we will come back to this at the latter part and the next page of the manifesto. In addition, there was a strong, and even today in the panel, we had this distinction between private and state-owned forests, and that it has an impact on the governing system with regard to non-wood forest products. And we got a proposal to highlight the monitoring systems, both when it comes to biophysical and to socioeconomic data, that we have better data available. I think it started from the first session highlighting the outreach activities and education. And also today we talked about standard setting being, very important to highlight the standards, and of course talking about investments and getting increased sustainable finance and investments in order to develop the different sectors. Europe plays again an important role with regard to trade, so that we highlight that both consumption and production should be sustainable, but also the trade aspects. And that in order to do so, we definitely need a strong linkage of and with the private sector in order to promote collaboration and partnership, and have the right tools available, including fiscal and labor regimes, but also again certification and traceability. And in order to do so, we need to have a strong collaboration of all organizations involved, with the aim to share information on non-wood forest products. And in order to, as a main outcome of this, that we need, of course, to join forces and to not only look at green growth and the eco-sociological progresses, but also to contribute to cultural resilience. So these were, in a nutshell, Stephen, the comments we got and which we integrated. We managed to keep it at 4 pages, and we hope that this will be a tool which will help us in our communication, and which also showcases the commitment which we have as participants to further promote the contribution of non-wood forest products to the socioeconomic development. Back to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sven, for basically guiding us through this document. I think I need to congratulate you on to process all this information of incoming suggestions, etc., in a very short amount of time, and then still produce this document, which I think we can all see has become a more refined document, in the sense that it contains, on the one hand, a little bit more detail here and there, and at the same time provide a little bit more balances, probably. So I think the overall result is certainly a more refined document. So thank you so much for the efforts. Now, the next step that we were to do, obviously, is, well, we have taken into account the suggestions that we have received. And before we could use this document, obviously, we need to know from the attendees the following thing, or basically, we need to know your answers to the following question. We are not at all asking any formal position from your organization, right? We can't do that at this stage. We understand that you are here probably not, how to say, representing your organization in any formal capacity, but we would need to know your personal position on this. Are you willing to endorse this manifesto of Alghero with the changes presented by Sven Walter? And do you think it is a good document, yes or no? And the answers could be, for all of you, you could say, yes, I think it's a good document, I endorse it. Yeah. Or it could be that you say, yes, I like it, but I still had a comment to be made and I didn't manage to send it in time. So if you would be willing to consider my suggestion, I will be able to, or I will endorse it. And so that might be another option. Or it is still possible that you say, no, I don't like this document. It's a very bad document. There is no use for it. Okay. So what we would like to do is a very short polling. And if the technology doesn't fail, we should be able to even do it within Zoom. If it doesn't work, then we just switch to the book lab that you already have used in the previous sessions. But let's give it a try if we can manage this within Zoom.
It's ready to go, Stephen, launching now.
Excellent. Okay, so you see the question. It's your personal position that we are interested in. I think it's open now, right?
Yep. Votes are coming in.
It works.
We have.
It's only the attendees.
35 votes. Panelists can also vote.
Oh.
Maybe as host you can't vote, Stephen. Your co-host.
I think you can guess what would have been my vote, but it doesn't count.
We've got 45 votes.
Oh, we have more than 50 votes now, yes. They are coming in, that's good. That's very good. So we have 82 participants. So let's try to reach to go beyond 60 responses. We're closing in to 60. Let's continue to vote, please.
I think we haven't received any recently, so shall I draw it to an end?
I think it's good, yes. So what we have is we have more than 50 participants, so almost, let's say roughly 60 participants that have voted. We have 91% who said yes, the way it is, and 9%, so 5 people say, yes, I will endorse this document, but I still have a suggestion I would like you to consider. So these two together says that basically we have 100% of all the persons that have voted basically say yes to this document. I think this is just a tremendous success. What do you think, Sven? What is your reaction to this?
This is impressive and great. I was very, not nervous, but very curious how this will work, particularly in Zoom, where unfortunately we don't have this direct engagement, with the participants. I mean, most we know each other, but that would have been, of course, even much more effective. So I think it is great. It's a pleasure, and it was also great actually to get your input, which, I mean, together with Sarah, we reviewed them and they were really excellent. And so I think I can just invite the colleagues, in particular the ones who indicated it just now, to send us please any other inputs, if possible, by end of the week. So with that, we can basically, based on the discussion we had, try to continue fine-tuning it. And then I would understand that this is basically, endorsed and will help us, I think, from FAO side, but also EFI, and hopefully all you and participants in your communication and outreach, because as Shadi mentioned it as a master plan, to see these are the priority areas we see as important to engage. And obviously, as speaking now for FAO as a co-host, you have, our full engagement to continue doing it together with the colleagues which we have here, for example, Chadi for Silver Mediterranean, or also Ms. Polikurva, who is the acting chair of the European Forestry Commission, but obviously also the other regions. So it's a great result, and thanks a lot to all participants who have contributed to it. Thanks to you, Stephen.
I think in 10 years' time, we might look back at this document that will have been circulating, probably even at the global scale. Everybody will refer to this manifesto of Alghero, and you, participants of this event, you will know two things. First, you were there, you were at the basis of this document, and second, you will probably be the only ones to know that, yes, it is called Manifesto of Alghero, but basically it's a virtual Alghero, right? So, and that is something only the participants, the attendees to this forum will know. So thank you so much. This is, I think, very good news we have here. So let's now proceed, perhaps by handing the word to Inácio. Inácio, we know what to do now with this manifesto, which is great, but could you perhaps explain just the next steps on the white paper, the Incredible project, etc.?
Okay, thank you. I will try to be very brief because I'm worried with the time, and
yes,
all participants will have other things to do. So yeah, Incredible project is finishing end of April. We still have some work, so we invite you to join us for the next activities that are still happening. Because of the COVID situation, one of our inter-regional workshops on resin and also other green chemicals, tall oils, will be happening in April. I think we can post the link to the event. We will discussing issues specifically related to resins and other fine chemicals, looking at innovation, science, and looking also this market side, which is so important, this marketing side. And then also in April, we'll be having the final conference. So if you want to meet the Incredible community and continue understanding better what we have done, the key achievements, the repository, the open innovation challenges, and this white paper will be presented there. So we invite you all. We can also post the link into the web. Of course, we will feed all this knowledge into our new Mediterranean research agenda we're developing, highlighting the key knowledge gaps in respect to non-wood forest products also. So for us, it's a living document, living material, and we're very happy with all the inputs received. Now we will finalize the white book also, the white paper will be presented the final version in this incredible General Assembly. So we'll try to collect all your inputs and feedbacks. We got quite many elements to better tackle. It was environmental education that maybe we need to put it stronger. It was ecosystem restoration and the role of non-wood forest products there that could be better reflected. Exchange of practices, best cases, some access to find. There are many elements that we will capture and we will introduce there to make sure that we have gathered the feeling. In general terms, we are very happy that I think we are all in converging in a common vision on what is the way ahead. So stay tuned to our channels and you are always welcome to more incredible events.
Excellent. Well, this brings us, I would say, to the end of this policy forum. I think we had 2-day very intensive sessions, I would say. We are very pleased to see that even though, and we realize that we're running behind scheme now for 15 minutes, so I'm going to keep it very short, but we still have 80 participants to this policy forum. I hope I can interpret this as a signal, as an indication that it matters to you and that we have created, I hope, an event that you found valuable. I would like to thank all speakers for today's session, sessions in plural, also for the sessions of yesterday. I would like to thank all attendees for being here, for spending your time on this. There are always so many other things that you could have been doing. We're well aware of this. So the fact that you decided, it's your decision to have been part of this, is something that we can only appreciate, and we really value this, and we're grateful for that. Then obviously there is the entire team of organizers. I'm not going to mention all the names, etc., but I think we all realize that without decent support, even behind the screen, the screens, it would not be the same experience that we could offer. I would like to wish you all the best. Before sending you off, I think Sarah would like to set up a kind of a group picture for all panelists. Is that possible? How do we do that, Sarah?
Absolutely, Stephen, thank you. I would like to invite now all of the panelists, please turn on your videos so that we can do a group photo. Unfortunately, we can't do it with all attendees, as you know, the limitations on video that we have in this particular format. But if all of the panelists would now turn on your videos so that we can see you all, and then I'm going to tell you when would be a good time for you to smile and I'll be able to take the photograph. Just a minute, I'm just going to make one modification. Just a second. Okay, I can't get rid of any, hold on. Brilliant. Okay, we have the modification that I needed. I hope you will see all of the smiling panelists now, and I will let you know when I'm ready to take the photo. So just let's do a 3, 2, 1. I think that works. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And all the best to all of the participants, to all of you. I think we had a great event. Thank you so much. Good luck, success to all of you. All the best. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Thank you very much. Fantastic.
Thank you. Bye-bye.